Hi, and thank you for joining me for our topic today. Inflation is running very, very hot right now, um, up over nearly 8% year over year. I'm recording this in April of 2022, but inflation is personal no matter when you're talking about it. When we talk about inflation generally, as folks in the US, we're talking about the Consumer Price Index. And the idea is the Bureau of Labor Statistics goes out and says, what does an average consumer buy? There's a basket of goods, there's an average consumer, and they average it across the entire United States. Well, I'm not that average, probably pretty average, but you aren't either. You aren't the same as a family that lives someplace remote or someplace inner city or with a big family or empty nesters or someone even single. All of those elements make a difference to how each of you experiences inflation. It's always going to be different. Why does that matter? It's helpful to know that inflation is generally going up. We all probably are sensing that right now. All you have to do is uh, pay attention to any news source. But at the same time, you're going to the store, you're filling your tank, you're feeling inflation. What's really important is understanding how big of a difference it makes to you. How do I find out what my personal experience of inflation is, other than the annoyance of a very expensive tank of gas? I want to talk about that today because a lot of folks say, I've got a plan, but what does inflation mean for that plan? Now, it could be somebody approaching retirement for whom inflation is probably particularly scary because they're about to change from being able to control their income to being able to have a lot less control over their income because they'll be living off Social Security, pensions, and retirement. So that's a point in time where people are paying a lot of attention, but it doesn't mean it's the only time we care. So let's get personal. How do we find out what your personal rate of inflation is? Now, for those of you who don't love numbers, you're not going to like my chat today, but it's not all that hard. What we want to do is look at the categories of things that you're spending on. When we talk about what's happening in CPI, the categories are things, all items, 8.5% year over year. But they have categories: food at home, food away. That's had a big change over the last couple of years thanks to COVID. How we spend our money has been significantly impacted. Gasoline and fuel oil. Here in Denver, fuel oil isn't as big a deal. But I'll tell you, 70% inflation rate on fuel oil, there's some people really feeling that. Gasoline is up 48%. Now, part of that big number is gasoline costs dropped during COVID. So sometimes we might see some overcorrections, and I think those are. But overall, we're still seeing high inflation rate. Electricity costs are up over 10%. Heating, cooking, gas, 20%. New vehicles or used vehicles, my gosh, new is 12.5%, used vehicles 35%. And again, in the middle of COVID, people stopped buying cars. So some of that is renewed demand for what people didn't buy, but part of it is the supply chain issues. Trying to get a new car manufactured and getting a hold of all those pieces is difficult. That's making them more scarce, and supply and demand means that cost is going to go up. Even clothing has gone up. That's an area in inflation that has been deflating since the 70s. Less and less expensive to clothe ourselves. So to see 6.8% inflation there is unusual. A category they track is medical care commodities. Maybe somebody out there smarter than me, I'm not sure what that's going to include. Shelter, housing costs have gone up 5% overall. And I can guarantee you there's people out there watching this who are going, yeah, my shelter costs have gone way up. My rent has gone up, or property taxes or something else has gone way up. Other transportation services are up, medical care services. I list all these out so you can think about what are some categories I should look at when I'm looking at my own spending. Because what I'm going to propose for you to do is somehow, maybe you have spreadsheets, maybe you have your checking and credit cards at a company that will categorize your spending for you. Maybe you use something like Mint, or you work with an advisor that helps you aggregate your expenses. We happen to use e-money with our clients so that we can see what spending's doing, and look at spending by category from 2019, 2020, 2021. You don't have to do all those years. I'm an accountant at heart, so I have a tendency to go overboard. But if you go 12 months ended March 21, 12 months ended March 22, and see what those categories are, you can see what's happening, what's changing, and overall, what your overall experience of inflation is. Now, I went through and did it for myself. Yes, I have access to this easy software so that it's not too hard of a deal for me. And my personal experience of inflation was less than 8.5%. And part of that is I don't have to buy a lot of gasoline because mostly I work from home. So that's nice. And there's just two of us here. So we're not experiencing the daycare issues and some other, education related expenses. So my experience is a little bit less, but that means there's somebody out there who's experiencing more. That's how we get to this big average. What do you do with that data once you know what your personal inflation rate is? So PIR, personal inflation rate. So anyway, a lot of things you can look at. First of all, look at the categories. What I always tell folks is make sure your spending reflects your goals and values. Is your money being spent in a way that reflects what's important to you? Are you spending on your health appropriately? We want to all stay healthy. Make sure that that's a category that the expenditures make sense for you. By the same token, are you spending too much money on fast food? I know that it's easy for me to do that. And so when I do analyses like this, it helps me go, rethink, rebalance, pull back on the fast food, focus more on the healthy food, where we eat out, choose healthier places. When we're cooking at home, choose healthier food, not the hot dogs, that kind of thing. So, but there's all sorts of choices you can make when you look at those lists of expenditures. We can look at them in a short time frame, what's happening over the next week, month, year, but also in the long term for people who are approaching retirement and you're looking at maybe high housing costs. It could be time to say, is it time to consider a move to somewhere else? Much bigger topic than what we have time for today, but something for you to think about as we talk about what inflation is. Inflation gives you the choice of two things: allowing your spending to stay the same, and perhaps impairing the possibility of success for your plan, which means maybe there's a slightly higher risk of you running out of money or not having saving enough money if you're still in the accumulation phase, or like I say before, but being aware. Yes, it's important to me that I do fill in the blank, that I work out at the gym, right? That's health. Perhaps it's social. Perhaps it's just, good mental health for you. That's an important expenditure. And you'll want to make sure that you find a way to keep that there. Now, does it always have to be a particular type of gym? Maybe in the effort to save money, you change the gym that you go to, or you change the way you interact with the gym, fewer personal trainer days, more group lessons. There's ways to still achieve the goals that you want while still staying within your plan, basically. But it's all about understanding how the money is flowing through into your life and back out, and how inflation is affecting that. So this is just the first of several videos we're going to be doing talking about inflation and what you can do about it. Today was all about awareness, knowing what your personal inflation rate is and what kind of changes you might want to make once you understand that. If you've got other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. I'm going to include a spreadsheet template so that you can create your own personal inflation rate spreadsheet, and let me know how that works for you. Thanks for joining us. This has been DeDe Jones with Innovative Financial. Have a great afternoon.